The greatest weapon we have against stress is our ability to choose one thought over another. William James, John Rose. Think about that, my friends. We can change our thoughts and we can change our world. We have the ability to choose one thought over another. We have to understand how profound that is. As Abraham Lincoln once said, we're just about as happy as we make up our minds to be. So much of our stress is self-inflicted through our thoughts and our emotions and our perceptions, which then, of course, lead to our behaviors. So in this video, I'm going to take a closer look at stress. I'm going to take a closer look at some coping mechanisms. I'm going to take a look at the 2 best ways to be proactive. And of course, I'm going to take a quick look at some adaptogens we can use to help us in this stressful world we live in. Nowadays, stress is a 4-letter word. It used to not be so bad. In fact, stress used to serve a purpose. Back in those days when we had what they called the golden age, stress served a vital purpose. Because when stress kicks in, when we're exposed to a stressful situation, 4 of our 10 body systems shut down so the other 5 can kick in. So one of the very first things we have to understand about stress is to look at what stress is doing to us. And then take a closer look at the types of stress we have so we can choose the best coping mechanisms. So what happens when we are in a stressful situation? 10 body systems, folks. Our body's nothing but a bunch of cells and 10 body systems. Cells form tissues, tissues form organs, tissues and organs form body systems. More specifically, a group of cells that perform specific functions form tissues. Types of tissues with specific functions form organs, and then groups of organs and tissues that work together that provide a specific function form body systems. 10 body systems. When stress kicks in, our autonomic nervous system is made up of the sympathetic and parasympathetic. The parasympathetic system shuts down 4 body systems, the rest and digest systems. So the other can kick in. The sympathetic system kicks in the other 5. The fight and flight response. Now we have to understand that because so many of us choose the worst possible coping mechanism possible. We turn to food. The last thing we should do when we're stressed is to eat. We should never eat food when we're stressed, even if it's the best of foods, because those 4 body systems that are dealing with resting and digesting have shut down. And yet, how many people turn to food when they become stressed, only to compound their stress? So it's important to understand what is happening to us when we become stressed. We have to understand that we want to be proactive instead of reactive. And one way I like to look at things is I always group things in as many different ways as I can. And when it comes to stress, I have 8, maybe 9 ways I can group stress. Probably won't go into one of those. But there's 8 main ways we can look at stress into the groups of 2s. There's positive stress and negative stress. And what's important is we want to be proactive when it comes to stress. And when we understand how to be proactive, we can actually turn what would be a negative stress into a positive stress if we can change our perceptions and acquire new coping skills. So once again, let's look at it as positive stress and negative stress. The main difference between these 2 is that positive stress is perceived as within our coping abilities, whereas negative stress is perceived as outside of our coping abilities. So if we acquire new coping skills, if we change our perceptions, we can change our lives. We can turn a negative stress into a positive stress. With positive stress, we're motivated. Our energy is focused. It's always only short term. It feels exciting. It increases or improves our performance, but negative stress causes anxiety or concern. It's not only short term, but it can be long term also. It doesn't feel exciting. It feels exhausting. It feels aggravating. It doesn't improve performance, it decreases performance, and it leads to mental and physical and emotional and spiritual problems. And the key here is it can be short-term or long-term. So when we look at stress, we got positive and negative. We have short-term and long-term. We have acute and chronic. We have within our control and outside of control. Now we want to be proactive about the things that are within our control, but we can also be proactive about things that are outside of control by learning how to take a negative stress and turn it into a positive stress. How? By changing our perceptions, acquiring new coping skills. So, in addition to those ways we can look at stress, we can also say that, again, stress can be either proactive or reactive. The two main ways we want to be proactive is, number one, eliminate the number one stressor on this planet, which of course ties into the fall of mankind. That is our number one stressor. Before the fall of mankind, as I mentioned moments ago, when we had a golden age, almost all stress served a valuable purpose because it helped run away from that lion or fight that foe we needed to fight, whatever the case might be. But now we're surrounded by stress every time we turn around. And the best way to deal with all the stressors in our life is to look at two groups of needs. Now, I did a video a while back explaining the sources of stress, and that's one of the 8 ways we can group stress. There's 2 groups of needs we must satisfy. And stress comes whenever we don't satisfy those needs. So the best way to deal with all the stressors in our life is to make sure we're satisfying all of our needs, especially the right food. Because eating the wrong food is our number one stressor. It's what creates all the other stress because it changes our mentality. It creates the stressful world we live in. That's why I always emphasize so much that we have to go upstream when we deal with our problems. But that's where these 2 groups of needs come into play. When we go upstream, we deal with those 12 essential needs. Going downstream, we deal with those 2 additional temporary needs. Where stress can not only be short-term, it can be long-term. It can become chronic. And this is important because now our body is damaged, and now we can use things like adaptogens to help us cope with and deal with the stress in our lives. So, we also have internal and external stressors. And the main way that I can group stress into groups of 2s is when we look at the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. Remember, 10 body systems, folks. One body system shuts 4 down. That's what the parasympathetic system does. The sympathetic nervous system shuts down or kicks in the other 5. So let's take a look at our body systems. Again, a bunch of cells and 10 main body systems. The first 2 body systems we need to look at is when I would say that our body is made up of nothing but a bunch of cells and 2 main fluids. Those 2 fluids come from 2 of those body systems. The circulatory system and the lymph system. So think of these 2 systems as trucks. One's a delivery truck. It's the blood, it's bringing in the food. The other is the dump truck, the garbage truck. It's taking away the waste matter. So let's make this simple. And why are we doing all this? Why am I doing this video? Because my mission in life is to help reduce the stress in your lives. Help eliminate the original cause of all the stress that created all of this, which goes back to the fall of mankind, the eating of the wrong food. So what we have to do, because we have become damaged, we have to look at ourselves as a chariot being pulled by dozens of horses. We've got to evaluate all those horses up there and make sure they're as strong as possible. And we have to address the weak horses because all the other horses will slow down based on the weak horse. So when you're trying to heal yourself, you got to satisfy these 2 groups of needs, but then you have to evaluate those horses that are pulling your chariot. Do you have any weak horses? Well, where do those horses come from? Well, they come from our needs, number one. One of those horses might be your sleep horse. Are you getting adequate sleep? If your sleep horse is weak, you're never going to heal because we heal when we sleep. Other horses that can become weak up there would be any type of damage we have, any organs or body systems that have become damaged. So again, we start off with the 2 main body systems, the blood and the lymph system, the kitchen and the bathroom, the circulatory system and the lymph system. And then we have a main bathroom for that. That's the renal system or the urinary system. Now we have 2 main kitchens in the body relative to these body systems. The respiratory system, that's where the lungs give the blood some oxygen and the cells get rid of the carbon dioxide, goes back to the blood, and out the lungs they go. And then we have our digestive system. And Our digestive system, if we look at our digestive system, our mouth is like a blender, the stomach is like a juicer, our small intestines, I like to think of our small intestines as like a warehouse. So the blood can come along and grab the food and then take it to the liver, which is a combination of a kitchen and a bathroom. First thing the blood does when it goes to the liver, it finishes the process if it needs to, and then it distributes what the body needs and stores the rest. So I like to think of the liver as a pantry in that respect, but it's also a bathroom. I did a video, I'll put a link down below, on 3 ways the liver cleanses the body. One is by filtering the blood, so that's part of what the liver is doing as far as the bathroom goes. And then we have the large intestines, which is the main bathroom for our digestive system, because we eat and we have to eliminate. But we can also, but the large intestines is also partly a kitchen. Just like the lymph system, even though it's mainly a bathroom, it too is partly a kitchen. It can absorb things in it also. So we have the 2 delivery systems, the garbage trucks and the delivery trucks. We have the main bathroom, the urinary system. We have 2 main kitchens, our digestive system and the respiratory system. Then we have to communicate, so that's where our endocrine system comes into play, and our nervous system. Then we also have an integumentary system, that's our skin. That's important because our body has to communicate, right? What does our skin do? It converts the sunshine, takes the cholesterol, turns it into vitamin D, which is really a hormone. Again, that's part of our communication system. Then we have the musculoskeletal system and the reproductive system. Let's go back to the nervous system for a moment, because we have to understand the art of healing. If we're satisfying all of our needs, taking a solid food vacation, we're doing everything we're supposed to, we're supporting the organs of elimination, but you're still not feeling good, or you're just adopting a species-specific diet and you're still not feeling good, it's because your body might be damaged somehow. So we have to look at how all these body systems work. The nervous system can be causing a lot of problems because the body has to communicate. Now, we have a central nervous system and a peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system is simple: the retina, the brain, the spinal cord. Peripheral system, we have the voluntary system and the involuntary system, the somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. We already briefly talked about the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. They work with each other. We can become sympathetic dominant or parasympathetic dominant, and our whole system is going to function based on which system is dominant. Now remember, just to drive home this point, that the parasympathetic system is our rest and digest system. It shuts down under stress. Please don't eat when you're stressed. You got to figure out what to do, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So now let's go back to the autonomic nervous system, because there's the sympathetic and the parasympathetic which play into each other, but there's another part of our autonomic nervous system that's independent. It's called the enteric nervous system, and it's embedded in the lining membrane of our digestive system, all the way from esophagus down to our anus. And it's considered our second brain because it makes use of 30 neurotransmitters, things like serotonin and dopamine and acetylcholine. In fact, 90% of our serotonin is made in our gut, in the enteric nervous system. 50% of our dopamine is made within our enteric nervous system that's embedded in the lining of our digestive tract. So this is really important, folks, because if the gut is tight and it's not happy, the mind's going to be tight and it's not going to be happy, and it works back and forth. That's why the greatest weapon against stress is our ability to choose one thought over another. It's such a big piece of the puzzle. So when you look at all of our coping mechanisms, psychologists and researchers have come up with anywhere between 400 to 600 coping strategies. And all those can be broken down into 4 main groups. To apply a coping strategy, we can change our thoughts, our behavior, our perceptions, and our emotions. So there's all sorts of ways to do that. One of the best ways, obviously, to deal with stress is to satisfy your needs. Again, this is why the first thing we have to do, we want to be proactive, is remove the #1 stressor. By eating the diet we're designed to eat, our species-specific diet, that's going to allow you to handle all the other stresses in your life so much better. Because the best defense against stress is to have a strong body. We want to make sure all those horses carrying our chariot are strong horses. We have to dress the weak horses and support those weak horses. So what do you do for stress? What's your coping mechanism? A lot depends on our personality, interestingly. I've done a dozen videos on personality tests called personanalysis. Different personalities go through life differently and will be more motivated to do different things. Reds, for example, have more physical energy, so they'd much rather come out and exercise to burn off that stress. The high blues that are more thinkers would prefer to use meditation or some breathing exercises or relaxation techniques, because we know we can change the system from sympathetic back to parasympathetic system through meditation, through deep breathing, through relaxation techniques. And of course, one of the best things to do is to exercise. Think about it. You're stressed out. 4 systems shut down, so 5 can kick in. You got to haul ass, run away from that lion. Well, in today's world, we're not running away from anything. So if you have a stressful day, don't come home and self-medicate with food or alcohol. Get out there and exercise. You got to do that anyway. It's the best way to deal with stress, is to be in nature. And for me, just to be out in nature in itself helps me deal with my #1 stressor, which is noise pollution. Being an empath, I'm hypersensitive to sound. That's why I have to come out here and escape into the nature, into the woods. And I don't have to be exercising to benefit from being out in nature. Especially being a high blue, I'm a nature lover to begin with. But when I come out here, I come out here for the peace and quiet, to get away from the noises of a big city life. So we want to choose a coping mechanism that falls in line with our own personality. I don't have to tell you anything. You just want to find something that you like and that you do. And it's best to find something you've got to do anyway. We've got to move our body every day. We've got to have positive thoughts. We've got to have positive emotions. So we can change our thoughts. We can change our feelings. We can change our perceptions. That's #1 right there, folks. Because when you look at our perceptions, remember the difference between positive stress and negative stress is how are we perceiving it? Are we perceiving it as within our coping abilities? Do we have the skills to handle that? Or do we know we don't, so it's going to cause stress and now we're negative? And again, the best way to deal with this is simply to change our perceptions. Again, I love that quote by Abraham Lincoln. We're just about as happy as we make up our minds to be. We've got to change our attitudes and our perceptions. We can look at the lighter side of things. You can find humor in everything you can, and don't wait till you have a stressful situation to find humor in it. Develop that attitude where every time you look at something, you try to find humor in it. So that when you do encounter a stressful situation, you'll automatically go to something that will keep you from making a negative stress more negative, and in fact, you can turn around and make it positive. Because when you make a negative stress positive, you can use it to motivate and focus your energy and allow you to accomplish something better. But remember, of the 2 ways, the best ways to be proactive, the best way is to avoid those problems. Be prepared. Plan for any type of stressful situations in advance if you can. But the best way is to simply build the best body you can. Understand that we've got dozens of horses out there pulling our chariot. They have to do with our needs. They have to do with our body being damaged. It's up to you to find out what organs are damaged. If your adrenals are damaged, we can have hyper or hypo conditions. It's interesting when you look at the disease names our so-called experts give these conditions. When I was doing some research on this recently, I was looking at all the ways that our magician doctors confuse us by naming the symptoms. I came up with 5 main symptoms that have to do with being hyper. Now let me emphasize this point right here. When we agitate systems, they become hyper at first. They produce too much hormones, but then hyper always turns to hypo, and now we produce too little. So there's hyper conditions and hypo conditions. And I went back through and I looked at all the different names that our medical system have used to describe these symptoms. I came up with 5 names for the hyper, and get this, 15 for a hypo. All sorts of ways you can call something your hypoadrenalism, hypocorticolism. So it can be a hyper or hypo organ. It can be a hyper or hypo hormone. And then there's all sorts of combinations they can mix together. They can even name your darn symptom after the doctor who came up with it. So that you got Addison's disease if it's hypo, and Cushing's disease if it's hyper. And when you look at the main causes of both of these, it ties back into 3 main things. One happens to be steroid medication. And of course, the big one is our own body's waste matter. So we have internal stressors and external stressors. We have mind stress, body stress, but we have situational stress. And when most people think of stress, I think that's kind of where most people are at, thinking the situations that create stress. And what's stressful for one person may not be stressful for another for many different reasons. Not only do we all perceive the world differently, but we also have different triggers. Some people can be triggered by something that won't trigger anybody else because it reminds them of a stressful event in their past, and it kicks in that mentality and they go right into the sympathetic mode and logic goes right out the window, right? I call that amygdalosis. We have an emotional reaction before we have a chance to think about it intellectually. But we can be proactive when it comes to stress, my friends. Again, it's either positive or negative. We can be proactive or reactive. Now, I did a video, I'll put a link down below, to Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And proactive versus reactive is one of his things highly effective people do. And of course, in my video, I pointed out that the problem that we have is that most of us don't know that most of the things we can be proactive about, we can be proactive about. We've been told they're outside our control. So it's important to be proactive and reactive, to know that there are problems within our control and outside our control. There is stress that's within our control and outside of control. And once again, so much of our stress is self-induced through our negative thoughts and our negative feelings, our negative emotions. And that reminds me of one of my favorite quotes by Mark Twain. I'm an old man with many problems, most of which have never happened. So we have the ability to choose one thought over another. We have the ability to be proactive and satisfy all of our needs. Remember, there's 2 groups of needs we must satisfy. If we don't satisfy any one of those 2 groups, we can become stressed. But there's stress everywhere you turn, isn't there? There's noise pollution. There's the environment. There are the poisons we're subjected to at the grocery store, at the doctor's office, inside the hospital. And remember, it begins with hyper and then ends with hypo. So in addition to these basic coping mechanisms that we can use, simple things to change our thoughts, our behavior, our perceptions, and our emotions, those are the 4 main things we can change. In addition to doing those, we can also use certain herbs and supplements that are known as adaptogens. Now, these adaptogens are known to help balance out our systems. If they're too hyper, they can be calming. If they're hypo, if they're not producing enough, they can be stimulating. So when we look at the adaptogens that are stimulating, for example, we have astragalus, we have ginseng, we have licorice, and also rhodiola. Now, interesting thing about the licorice, it doesn't whip your adrenals into a frenzy to make more cortisol. It has natural occurring cortisol in it. So we can do those things if we have a if we have a hyper condition and we need to be, or hypo, and we need more stimulation. But then if it's hyper and we need to be calmed, we can go to how do you pronounce that word again? Ashwagandha. Yeah, ashwagandha. Then the mushrooms work, the cordyceps. See, what else do we have here along those lines? We also have 2 more that I was thinking of, in addition to the mushrooms. Yeah, one is called tulsi, that's the holy basil, and the other is shisandra. Now, the ashwagandha, that actually does both. So there are herbs we can take if we have these conditions, but remember, this is when we're applying the art. The number one way to deal with stress is to be more problem-focused in our strategies. We have to understand what's causing our stresses and what is the number one stressor and what's the easiest way to turn a negative stressor into a positive stressor, or a negative stress into a positive stress. Again, folks, we can change our thoughts and we can change our entire world. We do have the ability to choose one thought over another. And it's up to you to make the best out of your life, the most out of your life, by being the best that you can be. So a lot of people will use stress as a reason not to take a solid food vacation, which is what my whole YouTube channel is all about. Thinking, the last thing I need is more stress in my life. I don't have enough time a day to do what I need to do now, and I'm not functioning very well. Well, that's the reason why you want to take a solid food vacation. The best way to deal with stress, my friends, is to get your body healthy. Give it a vacation. Give it what it wants more than anything else. And remember, the way the body heals is by resting. Don't believe these pseudo guys like Berry Boy out there claiming that your juice fast is going to weaken your ileocecal valve and now you're going to have SIBO. Well, I'm really tired of people talking about things they don't know and they're brainwashed by the systems. If you think you're going to get any valuable system going to get a degree in nutrition and medicine, you're delusional. They're only going to tell you things that reinforce the germ theory, not realizing what's really happening. And remember, there is an idea stronger than all the armies in the world. It's a solid food vacation, especially on juices, because now we can get enough people to do that. So fasting, whether it's on water or juices, threatens the powers that be more than anything else on the planet, along with a raw vegan diet. So a raw vegan diet is going to be attacked. Water fasting, juice feasting, solid food vacations are going to be attacked, making up baloney saying it's going to weaken your ileocecal valve, and that's why people have troubles. What a bunch of malarkey. Shows you how little some people know about how the body heals and how important rest is for the body. So if you've been stressed all your life, you start out hyper, now it's become chronic, now you're a hypo. You don't want to whip your adrenals into shape, do you? That's like whipping a horse. You got those weak horses, you can't keep whipping and making it work some more. That's when you turn to something like licorice that has what you need in it. So there is a time and a place, my friends, to add herbs, to add supplements. But the main thing we have to do is take responsibility and satisfy those 12 essential needs. And of course, you know, my friends, you've heard me say this 1,000 times. It's not easy to go where most people are at and switch and make little baby steps and try to add more fruits and vegetables into your diet. If you can pull that off, congratulations, but it's not very easy for most of us. The best way to deal with this is to realize what Tolstoy come to understand when he wrote that powerful 25-page essay to that wonderful book, The Ethics of Diet. He knew the problems we faced as a species. After a certain age, all we do is think about food, isn't it? Food, 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 food. We have no control. Christians call it self-renunciation. Pagans call it self-control. Tolstoy recognized that, and that's why he named the essay to this book, The First Step. I loved it when I read that a couple years back, because I'd already read The Ethics of Diet. But it turns out Tolstoy's first step is the same as my first step. I have a 3-step process to get us out of this hole so we'll never have any more stress again. The first step is on a temporary basis. Solid food vacation on juices. Just like Tolstoy's solid food vacation on water, it gives us control over things that are controlling us. And if you think it's going to add more stress to your life, you're wrong. It is going to take a little bit of extra time to do all these things, to make your juice, to buy the food and everything. But you're going to be so much more productive. You're not going to need to sleep as much. I just talked to somebody this morning that's waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning, only sleeping 3 or 4 hours because he's on day 63 of a solid food vacation. This is what happens. It allows us to be more productive. It allows us to choose a better thought over a worse thought. And I'm telling you, my friends, when we can finally wake up to that reality, that we have that much power within us, that we have the ability to choose a better thought over a worser thought, we're in for a treat.